Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, everyone. Before we start our lesson today, let's pray first. Prayer begin. Finish. How are you today? I hope you all in a good conditions. Okay, I will check your presence. It must be 6 students who connected with me. Well, I see all students are present in this teleconferencing video. Hello, everyone.
Hello, ma'am.
Hello, ma'am.
Well, I'm so glad to meet you in this special chance. Although we must learn online through teleconferencing video, I hope you guys are enthusiastic and persistent in gaining new knowledge. Well, today with me, you are going to learn about ecosystem. Ecosystem is one of the materials in biology that studies about various environments, not only biotic but also abiotic. It is a complex matter and is closely related to our daily life. Talking about ecosystem, we must have seen what the ecosystem looks like, whether when we passed a road or even in front of our house. According to you, how is the ecosystem looks like? Is it nice or even scary? We will learn about that. Okay, everyone, I will inform you about the learning objectives. First, students are able to identify biotic and abiotic components in the ecosystem. Second, students are able to describe the role of producers and consumers in food chains and food webs. Third, students are able to analyze the different types of biogeochemical cycles in ecosystem. Fourth, students are able to analyze the interactions in relationship between component of ecosystem in biogeochemical elements. Fifth, students are able to design animated video about food webs in the ecosystem. And the last one is students are able to present the animated video about food webs in the ecosystem that has created. To stimulate your understanding about ecosystem, let's watch the video first.
Indonesia is located on the equator that runs from Sumatra, Kalimantan to Papua. The natural beauty of Indonesia, which consists of the coast, a group of islands, mountain range, and the green of the jungle into Indonesia, is called the equatorial jamrut. The diversity of Indonesia's forest is home to a variety of life in it. Biodiversity is the second largest in the world after Brazil. Of all the biodiversity, 10% of plant species, 12% of mammal species, 16% of reptile and amphibian species, and 70% of bird species grow naturally in the jungle of Indonesia. Many of these species are endemic, meaning that they can only be found in Indonesia. The forest is inspiration for the identity of most of the ethnic group of the archipelago. Being proud of Indonesia's forest means being proud of our national identity and culture. Protecting the forest means protecting the one's identity and culture.
If you go to the mountains or forests, what can you say about scenery out there? What will happen if one of the components, for example trees, are removed? Will it produce a beautiful view like what you expected? The answer is certainly no, because the existence of one component is needed and influence others. It is God's creation that places all into a unified influence in our universe. Okay, now please pay attention. Today, you will learn about the components of ecosystems, interactions in ecosystem, energy flow in ecosystem, material cycles in ecosystem, succession, and the types of ecosystem. Talking about ecosystem, we should know what ecosystem is. The term ecosystem comes from the word okios, which means the house itself, and system, which consists of parts that are intact or influence each other. So, ecosystem can be interpreted as a system that is formed in an area and there is a reciprocal relationship between living components or biotic and non-living components or abiotic or with the environment. Well, for the first topic is about the component of ecosystem. In general, the component of ecosystem consists of living things or biotic and components of non-living things or abiotic. Biotic components include plants, animals, and also humans, while abiotic components include sunlight, temperature, air, climate, water, soil, rocks, and others. Based on how to obtain food, the biotic components can be grouped into two. The first one is autotroph. Autotroph organism. This is an organism who obtains food by changing inorganic matter into organic matter. And the second one is heterotroph. This organism obtains food that has been formed by creatures in other life. For examples, butterflies suck honey flowers, mice eat rice, eagles eat mice, and etc. Next topic is interactions in ecosystem. When studying interaction in ecosystem, it is necessary to know what is involved in it. Each type of living creature has its own function in the ecosystem, that is, living things as producers, consumers, decomposers or reformers, and detritivores. Number 1. Producer. In ecosystem, there are living things that can make or serve its own needs called primary producers. For example, all green plants, algae, and sulfur bacteria. Number 2. Consumers. Consumers in the ecosystem are all living things that cannot make their own food, or also called heterotroph, so that these living creatures can only swallow or digest some or even whole other living things as organic food. There are several levels for heterotrophic living things such as first level consumers or primary. This organism will eat producers organisms or plants as food called herbivores. Second level consumers are called secondary carnivores. These organisms are producer eating and consumer eating. Third level consumers are called carnivores or predators because the organisms eat their prey by hunting, catching, killing, and eating it. Number 3. Decomposers and detritivores. If one day you find a plant or animal that has died and the condition is still intact or fresh, whether after a lapse of a few days or a few weeks, even until a few years, the condition is still intact or partially left, even completely gone, not so right. After some time, a dead plant or animal will break into smaller parts and eventually disappear. That can happen because of the activities of the decomposing organisms. Decomposing organisms release cellulose, plant, or animal enzymes to become soft and then break down into small pieces and then absorbed. There are remains of fragments material called detritus. Then there are organisms that penetrate into the body of plants or animals and then digest or eat detritus. These organisms are called detritivores. For example, woodlice, earthworms, nematodes, snails, pitchworms, or sea cucumber. go on to the third topic, which is energy flow in ecosystem. Directly or indirectly, the energy source of each ecosystem comes from sunlight that is changed by green plants into chemical energy in the form of organic substances through the process that we call photosynthesis. In the process of photosynthesis, the form of energy is converted from the light energy into chemical energy and moves to the first consumer, second consumers, or even the third consumers, which ends in the decomposition process. In the process of decomposition, this energy is released in the form of heat, then spread to the environment and cannot be used anymore. In this case, the pathway to eat an edible, which is the producer process that is eaten by the consumer number one, then consumer number one is consumed by consumers number two, and consumers number two is consumed by consumers number three. This event is referred to as the food chain. As you know, the interdependence between producers and consumers is seen in the events of eating and being eaten. Energy in the form of food will move from higher level organisms to other lower level organisms through a series of organisms eating the previous organisms and as a provider of food for the next organisms called the food chain. The series of events eat or to be eaten in an ecosystem thus not as simple as the food chains. Consumers do not only depend on one type of food. On the contrary, one type of food can be eaten by more than one type of consumer. Every level in the food chain is called the trophy level. There are several levels of trophy level in the food chains, such as trophy level number 1, organism from producer class or primary producer, trophy level number 2, or organism from the herbivorous class or consumer primary, trophy level number 3, or organism from the carnivorous class or consumer secondary, and trophy level 4, or organism from the carnivorous class or consumer's predator. Next topic is material cycle. In studying the energy flow, we will also learn about the cycle of material as a cycle, meaning that if an organism dies, it does not mean the flow of matter is stopped. The flow involves elements of chemical compounds that undergo movement through organisms or biotic and circulate back into the physical environment or abiotic, called the biogeochemical cycle. Biogeochemical cycles in ecosystem include the elements such as carbon cycle, oxygen cycle, nitrogen cycle, water cycle, sulfur cycle, and phosphorus cycle. Pay attention to the following video about each cycle. Well, now we are going to talk about succession. The sequence of development communities gradually change in form, called succession. You need to know the succession process will end with a community or ecosystem climax, which means the community has been able to maintain its internal stability, which is the response of the components to the normal conditions, of the community so that it looks as if it will not change. According to the origin of the occurrence, there are two kinds of succession, namely primary succession and secondary succession. The primary succession form is marked by the total loss of the original community. For example, a volcanic eruption, landslide, tin mining, and coal, so that there are no organisms making up the original community. All that is left is arid soil in the form of rocks. In a long time, the start of the emergence of pioneering organisms in the form of lichens. Secondary succession takes place in the former ecosystem is not experiencing total damage, so not totally changing in the original community. The substrate and original life are still found. For example, there is a natural fire, flooding, strong winds naturally, selective logging, or burning meadow in purpose. And the last topic that we're gonna talk is the types of ecosystem. The ability to adapt to defend an organism will give rise to types of an ecosystem. How do we know the types of ecosystem? How many types of ecosystem are there in Indonesia? To know the types of ecosystem, we must know the characteristics that are most prominent from the community in an ecosystem. Basically, ecosystems in Indonesia fall into three main groups, namely marine ecosystems, natural terrestrial ecosystems, and artificial ecosystems. I will give you an example for marine ecosystem, which is coral reef ecosystem. We can find this ecosystem in clear waters. Coral reefs are formed as a result of the activities of various marine animals, such as shellfish, snails, worms, solenterata, and lime alga. The conditions of animal life are snail, namely clear water, small wave currents, and shallow seas. We can find this ecosystem on the west coast of Sumatra, the south coast of Java, Bali, Nusa Tenggara, and the north coast of Sulawesi and Maluku. Next, I will give you an example for natural terrestrial ecosystem, which is meadow. This meadow occupies a vast area and is usually continuous with savannas. The vegetation consists of a mixed community of grass, terna, and shrubs. And last, I will give you an example for artificial ecosystem, which is agroecosystem. Agroecosystem is an ecosystem that is intentionally created for agricultural purposes. This ecosystem diversity is influenced by factors of soil type, topography, climate, and culture. One of the agroecosystems developed in Indonesia is ponds. Is there any questions so far?
I'm sorry, ma'am. I have a question about the material you have delivered. I would like to ask, what is the importance of studying ecosystem?
Great question. Studying ecosystem is essential to understanding how biotic organisms interact with their abiotic counterparts and allows us to understand the ecology of the area. Other than that, studying ecosystems shows us how human interactions and recreational or industrial use can change them. Well, now I will divide you into pairs to do project assignment. Well, I want Izar is paired with Bella, Desi is paired with Atin, and Tias is paired with Listia. Now I am going to deliver the student worksheet. your monitor that the assignment of this lesson today is to design a project plan. Then next week, you have to submit the result of your project. There are many types of ecosystems which there are food webs on it. Choose one type of ecosystem. Then make a short video animation about simulation of it or to be eaten in the food webs on the ecosystem you have chosen. I will recommend several applications for creating video animations such as Macromedia Flash, drawing cartoons, flip a clip, stick draw, and many more. Remember, your plan must include title, problems questions, project goals, equipment and materials, and product manufacturing steps. Now, I want you to work in pair and discuss about what topic you will choose for your project assignment. Is there any questions so far?
Excuse me, ma'am. I would like to ask for the topic that we choose. Can it be the same as other groups or should be different?
Nice question. I hope every group chooses a different topic from each other, so we can learn more about ecosystems and food webs. Well, if you don't have any questions, you can start making project plans. And we will discuss your project plans after 30 minutes. You can start now. Okay everyone, now it's time to present the results of your discussion, and I want to hear the project plan from Desi's group maybe. Please go ahead.
Thank you for the time that has given to me. Me and Atin choose the topic of food webs in the forest. For number 1, indicators about problems, questions, and the implementation plan is what is the impact for producer and tertiary consumer if all population decrease? And number 2, about project goals, to find out what the impact for the producer and tertiary consumer if all population decrease. And number 3, about equipment and materials, and the implementation plan is laptop, software of Micromedia Flash, food web in the forest. And for number 4, it's step. First, looking for reference about what food webs in the forest and its system. Second, making a food web in the Micromedia Flash completely. Third, increase the number of all population in food web, then start making simulation eat or to be eaten between trees and producer, all as secondary consumer, and hog as tertiary consumer. After the simulation over, we will export the animation as MP4 file. Enough? Thank you.
Well, that sounds good. You explained it well and completely, but why you only add one problem question? In my opinion, it would be nice if there were not just one problem question. Maybe 2 or 3 problem questions so that the simulation becomes more complete and detailed. That's an addition from me. Okay, next is our group. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you for the time that has given to me, ma'am. I will explain the project plan with Bella. We choose the topic of food webs in the rice field. So number 1 is indicators of problems question is what happens if the snake population is abundant, and what happens if the grasshopper population increases. And the second is about the project goals is to find out what happens to the population in the second tropic and fourth tropic if the snake population increases. And after that, to find out what happens to the population in the first tropic and the third tropic if the grasshopper population increases. And for the equipment and materials is laptop, Macromedia Flash application, and food web in the rice field. And the final is steps is first looking for reference about food webs in the rice field and its system. And second, making a food web in Macromedia Flash completely. And the third is increase the number of snake population in food web, then start making simulations, eat or be eaten, between snakes, rats, and eagles, and also increase the grasshopper population. And the final step, we are exporting the video animation as MP4 file. I think it's enough, ma'am. Thank you.
Good. The explanation is more complete. You also can add background, which is supports your animation video. This suggestion also applies to others group. Okay, the last group is Tias. Please go ahead.
Thank you for the time that has given to me. After discussing with Listia, we decided to take the topic about food webs in the lake. Our problem question are, what happens if the phytoplankton population goes extinct? And the second one, what happens if the zooplankton and benthos population increases? And our project goals are, number one, to find out what happens to the food web, and the second one, to find out what happens to the producers. Equipment and materials are laptop, drawing cartoons application, food web in the lake. And the steps, first, looking for references about food webs in the lake. We will use the simple food web. And the second, drawing a food web in the drawing cartoons application. And third, erase the phytoplankton population and start the stimulation. Then, increase the zooplankton and benthos population and also start the simulation. And final step, exporting the animation as MP4 file. That's all about our project, ma'am. Thank you.
That's great. I think all the project plans are fantastic. Good, everyone. Remember, you must create the video animation as clear as you can. You can add some additions like relevant pictures, sounds, arrows, and many more. To make it easier in monitoring your work, let's make a schedule agreement regarding consulting your project assignment. I hope the day after tomorrow you can send me the references that you find about the food webs that you have chosen, and then in the next day you can start drawing designs from your project in the application to edit animations. The following days you can contact me personally for consulting about your project if there are any difficulties, and after completing the guidance you will get a signature. The amount of guidance you do can affect your grades, so make sure to have a guidance routine. For the discussion section on the student worksheet, you can do it with your partner. Then send it to my email no later than tonight. Well, before I close this lesson, I want one of the students to make a conclusion about what you have learned today. Listia, maybe?
From this lesson, we can conclude that environmental components consist of biotic factors such as plants, animals, humans, and microorganisms, and abiotic factors such as soil, water, air, and temperature. The environmental balance will be stable and continue if the number of producers is greater than the number of first consumers, and so on. I think enough, ma'am. Thank you.
Very good. Okay, this is the end of the lesson today. I hope you get the knowledge completely and it is become a useful knowledge to help your daily activity. Before I close the lesson, let's pray to Allah may give us a useful knowledge. Prayer begins. Finish. I deeply ask for apologies if I have any mistakes. Thank you so much for your attention. The last I say, wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.